What's going on, my fellow Jedi and Padawans? Welcome back to another Jedi gaming video. Thank you guys so much for coming back to the channel, and if you guys are new, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about the Mountaintop. Is it back? Is it better than ever? We will cover all the god rules for both PvE, PvE, PvP. You know what I mean. This thing is absolutely a blast to use, so let's get right into it. First off, the Indomitability right here for its origin trait. Final blows grant grenade energy when playing on the light subclass, or melee energy when playing on the darkness. So it's about 5% of that melee or grenade energy back when you get those defeats with this. So very good for that nice ability spam, especially in Permatic that we're gonna get inside of the final shape. So this is a banger Indomitability origin trait. Now we're gonna start off with the PvE side of things. Boss spec on this bad boy for most of the activities that I am going through, maybe in some of that high-end content like the end of Pantheon, some of that wave 50 for Onslaught maybe could throw on that minor spec to help with some of those rank and file enemies, but I definitely think boss is the best. Now this is our velocity masterwork. We do have that micro missile frame, so it shoots a high speed projectile in a straight line, deals reduced self damage, and we move faster with this weapon. So I really like to jack this thing up for velocity as much as I can, which will also come into play with our perks. So for our first barrel, my personal option right here for our god roll is Smart Control Drift. With that 10 stability, velocity, recoil, and handling, we get a bunch of positivity on this for our perks, and we're already at 100 blast radius on this, so we don't really need anything in that category. Second option is Quick Launch. We get 10 to velocity, 15 to handling, so not as many buffs as our Smart Drift, but very good option too. Moving on to our magazines. Number one right here is Spike Grenades. We get that increased damage on direct impact, so we are getting a 12% damage increase on those special grenade launchers. Definitely the go-to, I would say, overall for this in the category. For me, my second option, and what I like to have on it as well, is the high velocity rounds. Gives us the 10 in velocity, 10 in reload, so this will jack us all the way up to 100 in velocity as well, with 93 in the reload, so a very good option. Moving on to our third and fourth column, the sleeper perk, in my opinion right here, which is my personal god roll, is this Impulse Amplifier. We get that 35% increase to projectile velocity, which helps us get up to that 100. We get 20 in reload, plus you can see the other little things that we get for our grenade launchers. It is a wonderful perk to have on throwing out as many of those micro missiles as we can. Second option right here is auto loading holster. The reload after a short period of time, about 2.5 seconds, so it's good for shooting this thing, switching on to another weapon, whatever you are going into, switch back to this, do a little bit more damage, bada bing bada boom, you got yourself a defeat. Now last for this third column, we do have a couple other ones like Ambitious Assassin and Overflow, which essentially do the same thing, giving us those 2, maybe 3 shots depending on our reserves in the magazine. But with having 100 velocity, 93 in reload, I personally like having that impulse over those 2, as well as that auto loading. But we do have demo here as our last option, which will just help in that ability spam that we get from our origin trait as well. So it is a nice little combination we have right there, and we can reload when we throw our grenade on top of that. So this would be my third choice. Now a couple different choices in our fourth column as well. First off, we got that Frenzy. After being in combat for 12 seconds, we get 15% damage, 100 handling, 100 reload for 7 seconds. So this is very nice because it's a 15% buff across all enemies, not just something like Vorpal that gives us to those bosses, mini bosses, etc. Love Frenzy, especially when it's paired with that Impulse Amplifier. Second option for me, which I really love, is One for All. Might be better than Frenzy, but it also depends on having enemies. So you have to hit 3 separate enemies within 3 seconds, and we get a 35% damage increase. So this is nice juicy damage that we can get, especially in something like Onslaught modes. Little easier to proc, but like I said, overall Frenzy, you just gotta be inside of the battle. So when you guys are trying to take down a tormentor, mini boss, something like that, or just anything with a lot of health, Frenzy will be a nice perk to have on, where you aren't gonna have to proc it by doing something else. Your last option, in my personal opinion, is the Vorpal weapon. We are getting about the same damage increase, which is only that 15% for bosses, mini bosses, vehicles, and players, obviously in their super, but we're not worrying about that until our PvP role. But Vorpal, a good option, just limits us to what we're getting that damage buff on, compared to One for All as well as Frenzy. So I personally like that Spike Grenade, Impulse Amplifier, and Frenzy as my #1 role. Would give this, compared to the old one, a good 4 out of 5. Very interesting rolls. I like it for its ability spam potential, as well with Indomitability, as well as demo. So love this weapon for the PvE side of thing, and it's definitely not as much of a menace inside of PvP either. So like I was saying, inside of PvP, not as gnarly as it used to be, but we are going to go with Freehand Grip as our weapon mod on this for that increased ready and stow speed when firing from the hip. So this thing is super nice. Again, for Master, we're going with Velocity, so we can have this thing stacked out as 100. Definitely the best thing to have in the Crucible, so people aren't going to be ready for this thing coming at them like an absolute laser. Barrel column, 2 options, Smart Drift Control. Our first one, look at all those nice buffs that we get: stability, velocity, recoil, and handling, giving us 100 in handling, 100 in velocity, and 100 in blast radius. So definitely the #1 choice. Second option is Linear Compensator. Get 5 to stability, 5 for velocity. Still have a good amount of that velocity as well as the blast radius at 100, but we are losing a little bit of our handling, so not my first choice, but a very good option. I really think high velocity is your best option, with that reload and velocity as your perks on this. Allows you to, like I said, have that 100 in blast radius, velocity, and handling, so it's absolutely disgusting. For our third column, first option is Slick Draw. Gives us that passive 100 in handling, plus we have that decrease in target acquisition, so it is a little bit of a miss of that, but it's not like we're using this thing as a sniper or a hand cannon where we gotta hit multiple shots, if you will. We're just letting these missiles fly, hot swap into something else, or vice versa, so it is a nice little trade to have on. My definite #1 option is Impulse Amplifier. We get that 35% to our velocity, 20 to reload, as well as that nice little decrease in the multiplier to rocket launcher for reload. It's just a little bit of different things for our grenade launchers as well as glaives, so this is my #1 perk for PvP. In the fourth column, got 3 options, totally interchangeable, if you will. In my personal opinion, I think this is probably the last option compared to the other two with Vorpal, because we're only getting that 15% against players in their super, so it'll help with that aspect. But overall, there are the other 2 perks which I think are better. The first one that we have is Harmony, especially with this grenade launcher. If we're getting defeats with hand cannon, auto rifle, before switching to this, we get that duration, which is a 20% damage increase and 15 handling for that 7 seconds. So it's a good option for PvP as well. Last but not least, we got that Frenzy as well for the PvP side of things, because we get that 15% damage increase across the board to multiple different enemies instead of just in their super or anything like that. So Frenzy is my #1 choice. very similar rules for both PvP and PvE for this weapon for sure. So I love to have this thing back in my rotation. Very good for PvP. PvE, I think overall better PvE weapon, would put this at like a 3.5, 3.8 in the Crucible, unless you are insane with the lining up of shots and stuff like that. I definitely don't think it is very viable inside of like 3s or trials, something like that, but it's fun to use in 6s. You can get some nice trick shots as well with it, so definitely a fun little weapon to have back inside of the Roto. Like I said, feels very nostalgic being able to use this, Hammerhead, Recluse all at once. So love to have these brave weapons back. Again, I appreciate all you guys for coming back to the channel. Means a lot to me as well, so don't miss out on these videos with that subscribe and bell button. Slap it around so you get those on notifications. But again, I totally appreciate all you guys. I'll catch y'all in the next one tomorrow. Peace.